Oh, your hair's perfect.
Get right. Why are you laughing, man? Good morning and welcome to Cornerstone. My name is Jeremy.
My name's Derek. Let's take a look at some of the events we have coming up here at Cornerstone.
The Wednesday night meal for this week will be tacos. It's going to be held in the gym at 6 o'clock, so please sign up on your connection card if you'd like to eat with us.
The Youth's Fine Arts is happening this upcoming Saturday, April 6th in Decatur. The event starts at 8 a.m., so be sure to head out early or show up at the church at 6 a.m. if it's better for the youth to carpool.
Our silent auction and trivia night will be Friday, May 3rd. It will be held in the auditorium, and it's going to cost $100 per table or about $15 per person. We are excited to bring you a new trivia theme and over $25,000 worth of wonderful items for the auction.
This year for Easter, there will be two services, one starting at 8:30 a.m. and another at 10:30 a.m. If you are willing, we encourage you to help serve during one service and attend the other. You might not be able to. We encourage you to help serve during one service and attend the other. Invite your friends, family, and neighbors out for the service. I'm bringing my twin brother. It's one nobody will want to miss out on.
We are also in need of candy for the Easter egg hunt that we're going to have in between services. If you're able to help by donating candy, there's a bin in the foyer right behind you on your way out that you can place the candy in. The weather's getting warmer, it's springtime, the Cards are playing, the bats swinging, the Cubs are still stuck with Hayward. It's time to start thinking about playing softball again. Games are going to be on Thursday nights at Gordon Moore Park located in Alton.
Registration is $40 to play. That includes 16 weeks of softball and a brand new Cornerstone custom jersey.
For more information, please come to our team meeting April 14th in the Ferguson room immediately following service, or you can see myself or Derek. Those are your announcements for this week.
Be sure to sign up for any of these events by marking so on your connection card.
And as always, you can find out more information about these events by checking our website at bethalto.church.
Today we are looking at the fifth beatitude in Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount. We find it in verse 7. It says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy." And just a little honest moment here from your pastor. This might be the most difficult one for me yet. That's because there is one area of my life where there is a lack of mercy. I have, over my years living, there's one area that constantly sticks out, in an area where I struggle with mercy. And some of you may identify with this, but for me, it is the school drop-off line, okay? Anybody else in the room drop your kids off for school? I don't know what it may, I'm sure all of you much holier and better people in other communities, but something happens between 7:45 and 8:05 in Bethalto where everyone's cognitive ability just goes away, all right? I'm not kidding. This Friday, I was at that three-way stop just south of the high school, and I was the second person to get to the stop sign, and the person that was third to the stop sign just figured that they were just going to ignore the rules of the road and turn left right in front of me. My mercy was lacking in that moment, okay? But then I drove in, and I got to the circle there at CM, and, there's like two lanes there, and the person in front of me just decided, because, we go crazy during the drop-off time, that they were just going to sit in the middle of both lanes and just kind of hog the whole area there. And you can tell, my blood pressure's raising a little bit here. I don't understand. Can we all just agree that you don't have to go and wait to the very last spot to drop off your child? I know he or she is your precious child, but the 2 or 3 car lengths, it's okay. They have gym. They actually run in gym, so they can walk a couple extra car lengths. You don't have to wait. And I understand that that there's stuff that you have to have. My kids, they got lots of bags and things, but we have a rule in our car. It's when you get up, no talking. This is not the time for conversation when we're in the circle. That was in the morning, eating breakfast, on the way there. This is serious business, people. Tuck and roll, get out of the car. I know you've got band instruments. don't put your band instrument in the trunk. Everybody's watching you. It's taking forever, all right? No mercy in the drop-off lane, okay? I have some problems here. So when we go to school, it's like I talk to Jesus before we get there, while I'm there, and then afterwards, okay? You know what I mean? Like, this is an issue for me, so pray for me. So when we talk about, like when we preach, sometimes I think people, and maybe you don't have this, certainly you don't now, but maybe you have this idea that pastors are like, ooh, holy. Like, I preach to myself just as much as I'm preaching to everybody else. So today, on the mercy one, I've got to deal with some things in my own life, in particular about the drop-off line at school. So please be praying for me. Look, when we talk about mercy, it sounds nice, but really mercy is not easy. I mean, because, okay, I'm joking a little bit here, but I do have a little issue in the mornings. But, I mean, that's a little thing. That's a small thing. And if I have a challenge with mercy in those small things, because I was delayed, the injustice, I was delayed 10 seconds. Do you know what I mean? Like, how much more is mercy a problem for us when it comes to the big things, right? We're in a series of messages called Upside Down. And we're looking at the Beatitudes that Jesus gives us at the beginning of the Sermon Mount in Matthew chapter 5. And the Beatitudes, they show us that in the kingdom of God, upside down is actually right side up. So in other words, we kind of look at life a certain way and we expect this to be true, but then Jesus comes in and he says these things that they seem upside down, but after looking at them, we realize, oh no, that's actually not upside down. I've been living upside down, and this is actually the way things are supposed to be. So over the last several weeks, we've looked at 4 different Beatitudes. Let's just do a quick review here. We looked at blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst. And I mean, these are obviously upside down, right? I mean, nobody wants to mourn anything, right? We want to avoid mourning at all costs. Meekness, we kind of identify with weakness, and we don't really want to deal with that. And we certainly don't want to be hungry or thirsty for things. But when we get to the 5th Beatitude, I think on the surface we go, okay, I can agree with this one. It says, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. So when I read this, I initially nod my head at this, and it seems obvious that we should be merciful to other people. And so maybe you might ask the question, how upside down is this? Well, in Luke chapter 10, Jesus tells a parable of the Good Samaritan. The parable of the Good Samaritan is probably one of the more famous parables that Jesus gives us. And a parable is just a story that Jesus used to teach. And so I want to jump to the end of that parable. So if you're new to the faith or if you're new to reading the Bible, I'm going to give you this little spoiler alert here. We're going to go to the end of the parable first. But at the end of the parable, Jesus asks a question in verse 36. Which of these 3, and we'll talk about these 3 in a minute, which of these 3 people do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? And then in verse 37, the expert of the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. So this parable teaches us a lot of different things, okay? Jesus is a master communicator. He's a master teacher. His sayings and his parables are very nuanced, and they enlighten us. I mean, they're deep with meaning. But the parable of the Good Samaritan, at least in one sense, is a picture of the 5th Beatitude. Because this expert in the law says, well, the one who showed mercy, that's the one who was really the neighbor. So this parable here is going to kind of illustrate for us what mercy actually looks like. And what's going to happen here is this. We're going to look at 3 different layers of mercy. We're going to start relatively easy on the surface, and we're going to go down into different layers of mercy. And we're going to find that as we go, we're also going to kind of have, I think, a flipped perspective, an upside down perspective, which is actually right side up. So let me just give a little bit of context here to the parable to kind of get to the meat of the spot where we're going to be spending time. So Jesus tells this parable because he's teaching, and a religious leader or a religious teacher asks Jesus a question. He says, Jesus, how can I inherit eternal life? So that's kind of the beginning of this conversation. The guy says, Jesus, I want eternal life. How can I get that? And Jesus says, love God and love your neighbor. He answers by quoting from the Old Testament, 2 different passages, love God and love your neighbor. That's where we get our mission as a church, to love God and to love others. And so the guy, this religious leader goes, okay, Jesus, I'll bite. Oh, who's my neighbor then? Who am I I know who God is, but who's my neighbor? Who am I supposed to love? Do I love everybody? Do I just love my Israelite neighbors because they're my neighbors? Who do I actually love? And so Jesus tells a story about a man who's traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. And we find out that on his way, he's traveling down this dangerous road. There's a lot of places to hide, and he has robbers that come out and they attack him. Jesus says that they beat him, they strip him of his belongings, and they leave him for dead. And he's just left there for dead. And then we're told by Jesus that a priest comes along. So this is the first person. This priest comes along. He's kind of like the equivalent of maybe like a pastor today, a really famous religious person. And the priest comes by, and the priest, it says, he passed on the other side. So it's like he walked all the way around him. I mean, the pastor's the guy that's supposed to be compassionate, supposed to love, but he walks around and doesn't get involved. Now, why does he do that? Well, Jesus doesn't say specifically, but we think it's probably because the priest was probably on his way to the temple to do religious work and religious duty. And if he touches a dead body, maybe he didn't know the guy's passed out or whatever. He doesn't know if he's dead. If he touches him and it turns out the guy's dead, then he's going to be unclean and he's not going to be able to work in the temple. So he values his religious duty over the needs of the person that's there. And so this guy passes along, and there's a second person that comes by, a Levite. Now, a Levite would maybe be like a lay leader in the church, like maybe somebody who's not paid but works really, really hard in a church, like maybe a Sunday school teacher or a deacon or somebody in the room here that you go, wow, that person is just so spiritual. That person, a Levite, comes by, and he does the same thing to this poor guy who's been beat up, and he walks around, probably for the same reason. He's probably going to the temple to do some work. And so that brings us to the third person, the one who showed mercy. And so what this third person does, this is the picture of mercy for us. When Jesus says, blessed are the merciful, we need to look at what this guy did to give us some clues as to what it means to live a life of mercy. So first, what we see is this. In verse 33, we see that mercy is compassion when there is a need. So verse 33 says, but a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. Now, this is a very surface level of mercy. Now, we don't know. We can speculate on whether or not the priest or the Levite had any kind of mercy or pity. It doesn't tell us that. I mean, I'd like to think that in their work, they at least felt bad for the guy, but we don't know that for sure. For many people, mercy is just kind of an extension of kindness. I saw somebody say recently that kindness is a friend calling when you're well, but mercy is like a friend calling when you're sick. So in other words, people view mercy like it's being extra kind or extra nice or extra compassionate. Or mercy is kindness when there's a specific need. And honestly, mercy at this level is pretty easy. Mercy at this level is when we see like something bad on social media, like something's going on, and we share the link to kind of help support the cause. Like, oh, I feel bad for this. We need to raise awareness for that. But that's all it is. Do you know what I mean? It's like we kind of feel bad. We share that link or that post or that image. Mercy on this level is maybe giving money to someone who's begging on a street corner. You know what I mean? We don't really get involved in any way, but we give them some money, kind of help them. It's mercy. It's charity that we give to them. Mercy might be helping a coworker who's been overwhelmed with work for some particular reason that's not their fault, and you just say, I'm going to feel merciful. I'm going to go help them. Now, this is mercy at this level is compassion without commitment. Does that make sense? So it's feeling bad. I mean, you might get involved a little bit, but there's no real commitment here. This is compassion at a distance. There's no buy-in. It doesn't really cost us much. Now, let me be clear. Kindness and compassion are essential to mercy. This is an important first step, but it's just the first step. The problem is that this step is where most people start and most people stop with mercy. They kind of feel bad. They emote in some way, have some emotional response. They might share a post online or something like that, but they don't really get involved. Many people want the feeling of mercy and the appearance of mercy without the actual application of mercy. And so this is why people will share a link, but but they won't actually donate to the cause, right? Or this is why people will say, hey, I'll pray for you, and maybe they'll mutter a prayer, but they don't do anything to really help the situation that they're talking about. So if a Christian simply stays at this level of mercy, then we really just offer a weak or hollow version of mercy to the world. It's an important first step, and this is necessary, but it's not at all the extent of what mercy needs to be. Because look, right here, even in this first step, it gets deeper. Because remember, we're talking about a Samaritan here. Now, the Jews and the Samaritans, they despised each other. I've read some scholars say that when Jesus even mentions the Samaritan, that it's possible that some of the Jewish people that were there hissed when they heard it, like some of you do when I talk about the Cubs. Like you just like you recoil from it. That's the response that the Jews and the Samaritans had to one another. There's a great animosity between them. So it's significant here that a Samaritan has pity or mercy or compassion for a Jew. I want you to take a minute now, and I want you to think about this. I want you to think about the person that you despise the most. Now, Pastor Eric, I don't despise anyone. Look, I just told you about the lady in the line, okay, at the pickup line, okay? So I got mine. I know you've got somebody, and maybe despised isn't the word you want to use, but think about that tension in your life right now. Maybe you're a parent and you're thinking of the kid that's bullying your kid, right? Or maybe you're the kid being bullied and you're thinking of the bully. Maybe you're thinking about the coworker who stepped over you or on you to get ahead at your expense. Or maybe you're thinking about the person that's in the room here that talked about you behind your back and created drama that was unnecessary. Or maybe you're thinking about the family member that wounded you more deeply than anybody knows, right? I mean, come on. Let's be honest here. Let's be real here. There are people in our lives that have wounded us and have hurt us that we despise or that we have tension or conflict with. And so my question is this: do you have compassion for them? Do you have mercy for them? This is the first step. And this is the easiest step, to just kind of have that emotion towards them. So maybe today you need to just start by asking God to give you compassion. And so it's easy for us to say, love God, love others. Give me, God, compassion for others, whoever they are. But maybe it's not just others that you need to ask for compassion for, but maybe you need to ask God for compassion for the other, the one that's in your mind right now, the one that wounded you this week or last week or when you were a child or whenever. Maybe that's where we just need to start and say, God, give me compassion in this situation. Now, not just for those others, but for our enemies. Now, initially, like I said, merciful kind of seems right side up, but all of a sudden, we get into some deep territory really quick, right? And we get to spin upside down, we lose our bearings, and we're like, oh my goodness, this mercy thing is harder than we thought. And that leads us to our second layer of mercy. Mercy is restoration when there is an injustice. So this is where we start losing people in the practice of mercy. Being nice to somebody or having an emotion towards somebody is relatively easy. I mean, look, there's people that we don't like, but it's easy to give compassion. It's harder to give forgiveness to people. And that's because mercy is closely connected with the idea of justice. So in the case of our text here today, there's been a great injustice done to this man. Again, Jesus said that the robbers stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. So, I mean, this guy is probably just bleeding out, laying there on the side of the road. This is a great injustice. And what does this Samaritan do? He works to restore. Look at verse 34. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And then he put the man on his own donkey, put him in his own car, and he brought him to an inn and took care of him. I mean, I think it's important for us to note, we're going to talk about what he did, but it's important for us to note what he did not do also. It's important to note that the Samaritan didn't deal with the cause of the man's problem and try to chase down the robbers and try to find them. The Samaritan doesn't look for retribution initially here. He doesn't even complain about the failure of society to meet the man's need. How can we have these unsafe roads? Why are there so many robbers? And all these things. Instead, what does he do? He immediately went to work to meet the need that was immediately before him and to bring relief. Look, church, there's a place to seek justice. And there is a place to speak out against injustice. But neither of those things are mercy. I mean, we can talk about that, but that's a different sermon for a different day. We're talking about mercy today. Author John Stott, I like how he puts it. He says, mercy is getting down on your hands and knees and doing what you can to restore dignity to someone whose life has been broken by sin, whether his own or that of someone else. That's what mercy is. It's getting dirty. It's getting down on your hands and knees. It's restoring dignity to that person. It's going to them and being involved in the circumstances of restoring them and bringing them back together. You know, that's true when there's an injustice against someone else. But sometimes, as we've been talking about, there are injustices that happen against us. So how do you respond when someone wrongs you? Do you get down on your hands and knees and do what you can to bring restoration to that relationship? Is your first reaction to forgive, or is it just to get even, right? We have to ask ourselves these questions if we're going to be people of mercy. Or how do you respond when someone else's wrongdoing catches up with them? Like they create their own injustice, right? What do you do? Just like, oh, they got what they deserved? Like I don't feel bad for them. They just got what they deserved. Today, it might have been last night. I think it was today. I was, on Facebook. I flipped through. I found a link. It was like a KMOV link, to a news article about a social thing going on. And I just happened to click on the comments. And there was a guy that said, good, they're getting what they deserve. And I just, of course, the drama there. And you see the comment that's in response to that. And the person said, oh, I see from your profile that you call yourself a Christian. That's really nice of you. Church, I would love to think that this doesn't touch us, but the reality is sometimes we live with that mindset, don't we? We don't get mad, we get even. Oh, they deserved it, right? But church, that's not mercy, but unfortunately, that's where, a lot of us live. We live in that experience. We need to go back to the Beatitude here. Blessed are the merciful. Why? It says, for they will be shown mercy. Jesus isn't telling us that we earn mercy by being merciful. He's simply acknowledging that there's a correlation between the mercy we show and the mercy that we've been shown. We're going to see this later on in Matthew. In Matthew chapter 18, Jesus tells a parable about a servant who owed a king a great amount of money. In fact, scholars say that the amount of money was more that was in circulation in those days. So Jesus comes up with a number that's like billions and billions, trillions and trillions of dollars that this guy owns the king. And the king, in his mercy and his grace, forgives this debt that his servant owes him. But then that servant, after he gets out of prison and he's been forgiven this debt, he goes out and he finds another man who owes him just like a few bucks. And he goes, and Jesus says that the man choked him and sent him into prison until he could pay back the few dollars that he had. And the king finds out about this, and the king is enraged, and he says, look, I just forgave you this great amount of money, and you can't even forgive this little amount of money. Forget all that. You're going to go back into prison until you can pay back the original amount. And so Jesus concludes the parable in Matthew 18 by stressing the importance of forgiveness. Forgiveness that comes in light of forgiveness received. You see, church, we forgive because we've been forgiven. We show mercy because we've been shown mercy. We love because God loved us first. And so the upside down nature of the kingdom of heaven is that it's not just that we're simply nice people or we have emotional, compassionate feelings for others, but we extend forgiveness to others in spite of injustice. You see, mercy doesn't ignore sin. In fact, the exact opposite. Mercy is fully aware of sin. Mercy calculates and weighs out the destructive nature of sin. It acknowledges it. Mercy sees the injustice, but forgives anyway. Just like the king in the parable. We show mercy to others even when it's costly, because at great cost to himself, God showed mercy to us. And this gets us now to our third layer. So mercy is compassion when there's a need. Mercy is restoration when there's injustice. And then last, mercy is investment when there's no obligation. Verse 35, the next day, so he spends the night at this hotel with this guy, making sure he's okay. The next day, he took out 2 denarii, which scholars say is several months' worth of pay, and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. So this Samaritan makes an investment of time and attention and energy. He uses his donkey as a mode of transportation for the guy that's been beat up. So he has to walk so that the donkey can carry this guy. He inconvenienced himself for the sake of this guy that he doesn't know and he has no obligation to. He brings him to safety. He pays the innkeeper, and then he promises to come back and to pay even more and do even more. I mean, this guy gets the overachiever award. This is the guy who's getting an A+ in math that wants extra credit, right? I mean, this guy's doing everything and more. This, church, this is mercy. This is not just feeling compassion. It's backing that feeling with action, and it's doing it when there's no obligation to do it. And this is what Jesus did for us. Easter is just a few weeks away. And Easter is the day we recognize the greatest expression of mercy ever shown. When Jesus came to live the life we couldn't live, when he died the death that we deserved, so we could experience the mercy and the forgiveness that we didn't earn. And it wasn't done out of obligation. It was done out of love. Remember John 3:16, one of the most famous Bible verses? For God so loved the world that he gave his son. It doesn't say, so God was so obligated to the world that he gave his son. God so loved the world. It wasn't obligation that drove him. It was love that drove him. And church, sometimes I think we forget this because sometimes we are like that religious leader, right? The religious leader who started this whole parable. When he asks, how do I inherit the kingdom of heaven? Tell me all the things that I'm doing, that I know I'm doing to inherit the kingdom of heaven, because I'm sure that I'm doing this because I'm a religious leader and I'm a teacher and I know I'm so great. And sometimes we think that because of our goodness that we can muster up, that we are going to earn our way into heaven. But it's not out of obligation that we are saved. It's out of God's love and his mercy that we are saved. So this religious leader asks Jesus a question, who's my neighbor? And he wants to justify his behaviors. And he's like everybody else in the crowd that day, despising the Samaritans, not feeling any obligation to them, feeling like they deserve to be outside. But church, if we're not careful, we can have that same mindset. And we can view our faith as a way to isolate ourselves and protect ourselves from the evils of the world and to keep ourselves pure instead of seeing our faith as an opportunity to share that message of hope and an opportunity to serve those who are broken, who are around us. N.T. Wright, in his commentary on this parable, says this. He says, what is at stake then, when Jesus was teaching it, and now, is the question of whether we will use the God-given revelation of love and grace, and mercy, I would say, as a way of boosting our own sense of isolated security and purity. In other words, are we going to view God's love and forgiveness as his grace as a way for us to isolate ourselves and to just kind of be pure and to stay pure and to not be touched by the world around us? Or whether we will see this message of love and grace and mercy, or whether we will see it as a call and a challenge to extend that love and grace to the whole world. No church, no Christian can remain content with easy definitions which allow us to watch most of the world lying half dead in the road. And church, this is quite simply where the world is, lying half dead on the side of the road. And the difficult part for us is most of them are living upside down. They don't even realize that they're lying dead on the side of the road. But we are called to do what the Samaritan did and to go out and to love our enemies, to serve them, to show them compassion, to have that emotion, not just to be hardened by that, but to have compassion for them, to restore the situation that they find themselves in, and to invest in them even when there is no obligation. We do this like the Good Samaritan did this, and we do this because this is what Jesus has done for us. Again, church, our mission is to love God and to love others. And that's the question and the answer that actually led to telling this parable. I want to go back to the end of the parable. It says this, which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. I mean, those first two guys, they had the first half of the equation down, didn't they? Man, they love God. They love God so much, they weren't going to let anything get in the way for them to go do their duties at the temple that day. They had the first part down, but they totally missed on the second part about loving their neighbor and loving others. You see, these first Beatitudes that we've looked at, they're very introspective, right? Mourning our sin, recognizing our brokenness, realizing that we're meek and all these. But now these Beatitudes all of a sudden start speaking about how we need to interact with people around us, because it's not just loving God and having that relationship with God. It's how that is now expressed to others as well. And so we need to show mercy to the people that are around us. We are to go and do likewise. And just as that command was important for the hearers and the religious teacher that Jesus was talking to, church, those words speak to us today. And those words need to echo in our hearts today. Go and do likewise. Which one was it? Oh yeah, it was the one that showed mercy. Go and do likewise. I know I joked a lot about the drop-off line, but I got to work on that, right? But there are other areas in my life where I need to make sure that I am going and I am doing likewise. And I know it's the same for you. Because it's hard in life when people hurt us and they wound us, or they're destructive and they run into their situations and we go, they deserve it. No, go and do likewise. Well, but Pastor Eric, they're out to get us. Pastor Eric, they're a group of religious fanatics and they want to go and do likewise. There's not an exception here. This is why Jesus made it a Samaritan. Because on the scale of things, it's everyone. It's the worst enemy you have. It's the meanest person to you. It's the bully in school. It's the person that wounded you the most. Go and do likewise. And if you're not, where does that leave us? It leaves us, perhaps, if we have the first part of the equation, it leaves us like that priest and that Levite who totally miss out on the work that they were called to do. We are to love our enemies and serve them, not kick them when they're down, not cheer for them when they're down, not to ignore them when they're down, not to blame them for the sorry state they find themselves in. And I'll go a step further. We need to search them out. We need to look for the broken and the hurting. And we need to do it and make an investment even when there is no obligation. Why? Because Jesus did that for us. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. As we remember mercy to us, we're moved with mercy to others. So how do we respond? We respond by being merciful because there is mercy available to you. How do you do this? How do you show mercy? Because you experience mercy in the first place. So today, if you're here today and you're far from God, you don't have a relationship with him, I want to encourage you to experience that mercy. Jesus came to live the life you couldn't live. He died the death that you deserved so you could experience the mercy and the forgiveness that you couldn't earn. And so if that's you today, in a minute, I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond. You can go to bethalto.church or use the connection card and respond there if you want to make a commitment to follow Jesus. But I want to give you a moment to respond. But church, we have the same way. We have to make sure that we are showing mercy because mercy has been made available to us. Let's pray. God, today, we take a moment to pray. And again, these Beatitudes, they just crash against us, and they're heavy, and they're weighty. And so, God, I pray that you would help us to really do our part to consider what it means to be a person of mercy, to have compassion, to bring restoration, and to make an investment without an obligation. Lord, I pray for each of us here in the room today that we would have that mindset of mercy, that we would go and do likewise. God, I pray now for the person here who doesn't know you, who's far from you. Maybe they recognize their sin has kept them at a distance from you. Lord, I pray that you would bring an awareness, God, of their need for you. Convict them of their sin. Help them to acknowledge their need for your mercy. And I pray that in this moment they would call out to you. And God, I pray for the person who is a believer here, the person who is potentially like the priest or the Levite in this story. God, may we not walk by the people in our life. May we not get to heaven and leave a trail of people that we've just ignored throughout our lives. Oh God, give us mercy. And may we show that mercy out of the overflow of the mercy that we ourselves have received. We pray this in Jesus' name. I just want to ask you to keep your eyes closed for a moment. If you're here today and you'd say, Pastor Eric, I need God's mercy. I'm far from him. I've sinned. I've broken my relationship with him. And today I need God's mercy. I know I am messed up. I'm far from him. And I need to enter into a relationship with Jesus. That's me today. I need that mercy. I need that forgiveness. I need that experience. If that's you, I'm going to ask you to do two things. I've already asked you to do one. And just in the next moment or two, fill out that connection card or go to the bethalto.church and do the next steps area. Let me know. I just want to know how I can pray for you. But if you could do me a second thing right now, just raise your hand. Those are the two things I'm going to ask you to do. If you're here today and you say, Pastor Eric, I need God's mercy. I need to have a relationship with him. Right now, just raise your hand up high so I can see it. I just want to know who I'm praying for today. I'm not going to embarrass you or call you out. Just want to give you an opportunity to respond and just express the need that you have to receive God's mercy. Raise it up high. All right, church, let's stand. I didn't see anybody's hands today. I want to remind you, Easter's coming up. It's a great opportunity for lots of hands to go up. It's a great way for us to show some mercy and some love to the people around us. Encourage you to invite your friends, invite your coworkers, invite your neighbors. I want our church to be a place where every week people are entering into a relationship with Jesus, and I can't do that on my own. We all come together, we invite people, we serve our friends in that way. So with that said, we're going to respond today in a couple ways. We're going to sing like we always do. We got a couple songs prepared that we're going to sing. But I want to ask our prayer team to come forward. If you need prayer, if you want to be prayed for today, come on forward. Our prayer team's going to be up here. And these folks are here to pray with you. They're going to keep your need confidential. They will pass it along to the prayer chain, or you can get on the bethalto.church and request prayer there. So if you need prayer, come forward for that. But then I'm going to ask, as I have the last several weeks, I'm going to ask that we as a church take some time to just come to the altar area here and consider what it means to be merciful. Maybe just today, you're an established church person here. You just need to come up here and remind yourself of the mercy that you yourself have received. There's nothing wrong with stopping and saying, oh God, thank you for saving me, because I was a pretty wretched sinner back in the day. Or maybe I was a pretty wretched sinner on the way to church today, and I need to get some things right with you now. Maybe you need to come forward and spend some time here and say, God, I want to make sure I'm not leaving somebody on the side of the road and I'm passing them by. Maybe you just need to say, God, maybe it's that first step. God, give me compassion. But church, let's respond today. We call this the altar area because an altar is where you sacrifice things, you lay things down, you give things up. And this is a symbolic place for us to do that. So I want to encourage you to symbolically, to show God and to show others that you're serious about being merciful and experiencing the mercy of God. So we're going to respond in that way. We're going to sing, you can be prayed for, or let's spend some time responding and talking to God about our need for mercy. Let's do that today. Worship team, would you lead us?